No bill introductions. We'll go ahead and open the hearing on Senate Bill 8. Adam, will you give us a briefing?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senate Bill 8 would require that in the event that a motor vehicle is stopped with hazard warning lights, road flares, or caution signals, the driver of an approaching motor vehicle shall either do one of two things: change lanes if possible, or proceed in the same lane with due caution and reduce speed to maintain a safe speed. Violation of this section would result in a fine of $75. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Committee questions? Seeing none, thank you, Adam. Our first conferee, Travis Lowe. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Always a pleasure to be here. My name is Travis Lowe from the Braden Heidner Loan Associates firm, here today representing AAA Kansas. As a proponent of Senate Bill 8, AAA proudly serves over 350,000 Kansans across the state. On behalf of AAA, we'd like to thank you for the opportunity to support legislation that we believe will improve roadside safety for our drivers and, most importantly, vulnerable bystanders on the side of the road. Senate Bill 8 offers a two-pronged approach to protect drivers who are stranded on the side of the highway in a disabled vehicle, as well as other drivers on the road. By disabled vehicles, and this is defined on page 1, lines 7 to 10 of the bill, we're referring to vehicles on the side of the road that are displaying hazard warning signs. That can include the hazard lights, road flares, caution signals, traffic cones, or reflected triangles. Senate Bill 8 works in two scenarios. The bill says if a driver is on a two-lane highway and they come upon a disabled vehicle on the side of the road in the circumstance we just described, that they need to proceed with due caution as they pass that vehicle. That means proceeding with due caution means being aware and slowing down. The bill does not mandate that you must slow down to a specific speed, although that is common in some states. We're just talking about braking, slowing down, and being careful as you pass that disabled vehicle, i.e. not whizzing by 70 miles per hour as someone is mere inches on the side of the road on their hands and knees changing a flat tire. The other scenario the bill states, if your person's driving on a four-lane highway, like an interstate, they come upon the disabled vehicle, the ideal scenario would be to switch over to the opposite lane. But if the traffic conditions do not allow that, then to please just proceed with caution, just like you would on a two-lane highway. Now, it is very common to see disabled vehicles on the side of the highway. Drivers and the occupants may be changing a tire. The hood could be propped open. People milling about the room as they wait for vehicle support to help them on the side of the road. This does sound like common sense, and we're confident that many of y'all already practice this good measure, but sadly, disabled vehicles are not protected within our Kansas move-over statutes, and we have seen the consequences. Sadly, Kansas crash statistics show in the last 5 years, this has resulted in 10 fatalities, about 2 deaths per year, and 944 empty vehicles were struck on the side of the road during that same time period. Additionally, 82 vehicles had people inside. So overall, about 1,100 vehicles hit on the side of the road in that 5-year time period. You'll hear more about that from some of our other conferees. Kansas already does have a slow down and move over law for emergency vehicles, tow trucks, utility vehicles, maintenance vehicles, but not for disabled vehicles. And we do want to clarify that this bill does not apply to vehicles that are left on the side of the road that have been marked with the law enforcement tape that are waiting to be towed. We're talking about the disabled vehicles with the hazard warning signs and people there most likely to be inside. This bill does provide for a $75 fine, and that's detailed on page 7 in that italicized language. We are not aware of a fiscal impact of this bill. We've not seen the fiscal note yet for this bill, but we saw the ones last session. Because for the veterans of the legislature, y'all had a hearing on this specific topic last year in the form of Senate Bill 142, and it was recommended by this committee, which we appreciate, and ultimately passed by the Senate on the floor by a vote of 38-2. But unfortunately, the bill stalled during the conference committee processing in the session due to some unrelated issues that were within that conference committee report. And that, Mr. Chairman, we thank the committee's consideration, and we'll stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Committee questions for Travis. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Lowe. The question I have is, with states that have implemented this, and I'm a fan, I'll start with that, but with states that have implemented this, are there any statistics that show a reduction in accidents as a result of this? Or is there any homework that's been done there that, whether it's you or someone that may talk to it later, I was just curious if there's any data on that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator, I am actually not aware of any specific statistics citing the reduction. So far, it's passed about 25 states. This is a little bit of a new thing we're trying to get forward, but perhaps law enforcement has some information. But we can reach out. AAA has data we can circulate with the committee as well.
Thank you. It is common sense legislation, so it's, yeah, very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Senator Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Travis, assuming success with this bill, how do you guys plan to get the word out, and who are going to be your partners, and what's the timeline that you expect to get that out in the community?
That's a great question. If I can answer the senator's question. So we'd yield to KDOT and law enforcement on how that campaign would be unleashed, but it would be AAA Kansas works very closely with the news media on any type of changing traffic safety laws. We're very fortunate the legislature has supported a lot to these different types of things over the last several years, so we have that campaign generally before the bill comes into effect on July 1st, and then there'll be, I'm sure, notices with some of the highways as well.
Committee for the questions. Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do remember this from last year, and I'm sorry if you said this. I was trying to pull the bill up. Is this the exact same bill from last year?
That's a good question. If I can answer the senator from Shawnee. So yes, ma'am. So this bill was introduced last year. It's in Bill 142. It was what we called this disabled for move over disabled vehicles legislation. So in the form that it passed this committee and the Senate 38-2, it is the exact same bill with the dates changed over by revisor Siebers. We're fortunate for his help. The bill was further amended as it went to the House, and it had multiple other issues added to it, and it passed the House in that form, the amended form, and then it went to conference committee, of which the Senate did not vote for it again. We report. So that's a long-winded way of saying it's the same form as you saw it last.
The Senate passed it.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I just want to clarify. Thank you.
Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for bringing this to the legislature again, keeping those who travel on Kansas roadways safe. I had to pull up the bill too. We didn't have the bill in our packet. So, I have two questions. One, this talks about traveling on a highway, and it does mention if the driver is not traveling on a highway of a type described in paragraph 1. So we're talking then about our streets in our cities, and so we've got that in place too, not just your highways, but your streets around town as well. That would be covered?
It's my understanding the bill pertains to highways, which the definition of highway, and I can give you the citation if you'd like, but it means the entire width boundary lines between the public way maintained. And so this would refer to, it doesn't distinguish between an interstate, state, or a United States highway. It'd be my understanding that if a U.S. highway runs through a city, I guess it would be applicable, but would yield to law enforcement for further clarification. But this would not pertain to every city, street, in a neighborhood or anything like that.
So it would not, just our highways, U.S. highways, state highways, and interstates.
Adam, could we get a clarification on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Under the definition of highways, as he mentioned, it picks up kind of a global definition used in the Uniform Act regulating traffic. It's a very broad definition. So highway, the term highway, while commonly construed to think of state highways or something like that, the definition of meaning the entire width between the boundary lines of every way publicly maintained when any part thereof is open to the use of the public for purposes of vehicular travel. It's my understanding that commonly includes all roads. I'd probably defer to if law enforcement would have any counter to that, but it's my understanding that always applies to all roads, even though the definition means states highway, it's essentially all publicly maintained roads.
So that would apply then to our city streets as well, it sounds like?
Yes, ma'am.
Would. Okay, well, I mean, we need to be safe on those roads too, so. And my second question is, this is a misdemeanor, it's a felony, what are we talking about?
So my understanding is, and it would yield to law enforcement who know a little bit more details about this than I would, but it is a $75 fine if it's that could go either to district court or the municipal court, depending on the jurisdiction that made the citation. So it'd be a fine.
Okay. But you're issued a citation to appear, it's a,
We'll get clarification from the revisor.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator, yes, it would be a traffic infraction. There's obviously felonies, misdemeanors, and then the third kind of offense is traffic infraction. So it would not be either a misdemeanor or a felony. It would be considered a traffic infraction.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification, and thank you again for bringing the bill again to the legislature. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Albright.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Travis, I'm not sure if this is a question for you, but, and maybe it's in this, and I have not seen this, but in the event of a stalled vehicle to the side with no flashers, no orange tag, who's protected in that scenario in the event of something happening?
It's our understanding, as stated as on line 7 to 10 with the disabled vehicles, this bill just applies to the disabled vehicles, so they need to have those hazard warning signs, flashing cones, that type of nature. If the vehicle does not have those types of signs, it's my understanding it would not fall under the definition of a disabled vehicle and would therefore not be applicable to the bill. Common sense suggests that would still be the best practice, and maybe one day we can have that conversation. But as for right now, this is pertaining to just the disabled vehicles themselves, but happy to yield to the revised receivers for a correction.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would agree that, if they don't have any sort of hazard warning lights, road flares, caution signals, or that'd be one element to establish a violation. So lacking those, the other traffic infractions could be potentially committed, but this one would not be implicated.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That actually sparked another quick question, and it's probably not for you, but it's just a statement that, a lot of this, like when you're in driver's education, I always go back to driver's education because that's where the majority of us get our driver's training, or we go to a private academy to get that done. When you're being, we don't teach this in driver's ed, but I'm just saying, when you're changing a flat tire on the side of the road, you're not putting on your flashers usually. And you may or may not have cones out. So maybe that's something that we need to make sure that through our driver education programs that we encourage that. If this bill goes through and it's passed, I mean, it is for their safety, right? But I'm thinking of all the people I've passed on the highway, just between here and Kansas City, and those of you who drive that. How many people do you see who are changing a flat tire have their flashers on? Very few, or put out cones. So it's all about public safety, right? So there's maybe another piece to this that doesn't belong in statute, but that we just need to think about. Thank you.
Committee, further questions for Travis? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next up, I believe we have Candace Brashears. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning to you, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee. The Kansas Highway Patrol appreciates the opportunity to provide testimony in support of Senate Bill 8, and we respectfully request the committee consider our agency's concurrence. My name is Captain Candace Brashears, and I have served with the Kansas Highway Patrol for nearly 19 years. Kansas law provides that drivers, upon approaching a stationary authorized emergency vehicle using its emergency lights, are required to move into a lane not adjacent to the stationary emergency vehicle, or if moving to a lane not adjacent is impossible or unsafe, to slow down when approaching the stationary emergency vehicle. Authorized emergency vehicles include but are not limited to fire, police, EMS, and tow vehicles. Other laws provide similar protections to waste collections, utility, telecommunications, construction, and highway maintenance vehicles. Senate Bill 8 would essentially mirror the requirements of drivers approaching emergency vehicles and apply them to any stopped vehicle displaying hazard lights or other caution signals. I can attest to the danger we encounter daily when working on the side of the road. A matter of feet and sometimes inches can be the difference between conducting a safe traffic stop and being seriously injured or killed by a passing vehicle. Therefore, we have laws to protect police, firefighters, emergency medical services, tow truck operators, and we believe such precautions should apply to other stop motorists on our roadways. Citizens often have no choice but to stop on the shoulder of a highway after a blown tire, overheated engine, or empty fuel tank. We can all recall a time when our car left us stranded and the feeling of semi-trucks whooshing past our window, the worry for our children's safety in the back seat, and the anxiety of not knowing whether the next approaching vehicle may cross the fog line and turn a bad day into a deadly day. The Kansas Highway Patrol understands that crashes cause more than crumpled metal, debilitating injuries, or death. The void that's left behind affects the entire community, from the first responders who arrive on the scene to the family members who are left to pick up the pieces. If you ask any state trooper, one of the worst parts of our job is to tell someone their loved one won't be coming home, that they were killed in a traffic crash. I have seen troopers get struck by passing motorists that failed to move over. I have seen many crashes, too many to count, where vehicles that were broke down on the side of the road have been struck by other vehicles that did not move over. My experiences are not isolated. These crashes happen across Kansas every day at all times of the year. These crashes are preventable. My career path led me to safety education and prevention. As a trooper that has taught defensive driving classes for many years, moving over for broken down motorists as well as emergency vehicles is something that we have talked about in classes for years. This behavior is not only courteous to other motorists, giving them extra room could prevent a crash, which in turn could save a life or prevent life-altering injuries. If you or your loved ones were broken down on the side of the highway, you would want other motorists to move over as well. We believe this law takes a common-sense approach to remedying an unsafe situation. Kansas would join 25 other states with similar laws, including our neighbors in Oklahoma, Iowa, and Colorado. We appreciate that the bill considers traffic, weather, and road conditions, and whether these movements would be safe to perform. We also believe that making Senate Bill 8 law would strengthen our other move-over law as it aligns our message across the board. If you see flashing lights, move over and slow down. In conclusion, the Kansas Highway Patrol strongly supports Senate Bill 8. We sincerely thank the members of this committee for considering our testimony and urge their support of the bill. I'll stand for questions.
Committee questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Next up, we have Ed Klump. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Ed Klump. I am here representing the Kansas Association of Chiefs of Police, Kansas Sheriff's Association, Kansas Peace Officers Association. Mr. Chairman, if I may, there's some new faces here. If I could just very briefly talk a little bit about where I come from in the law enforcement field. I 35 years in law enforcement, 2 of it in Lawrence, the rest of it here in Topeka. Last 5 years, I was chief of police, very active in the Chiefs Association. After my retirement, somebody had the idea I should come up here and lobby for the associations, and this is now my 19th year of doing that. So that's my history in a nutshell. It's my pleasure to be up here speaking on behalf of our associations in support of this bill. This is a very common sense approach, as you've already been told. This bill is designed to address those situations that have a higher risk of people being around these vehicles when they're on the side of the road. And that's the purpose behind requiring the warning cones, warning lights, 4-way flashers. Everybody has the opportunity to have 4-way flashers on anymore. They may choose not to use them, but if they want that protection, all they got to do is push that little button and they'll have it. There's also another important factor of this I don't think has been mentioned heavily yet. I think the Highway Patrol just mentioned them, but that's the consistency. We have other laws on the books already covering, in the last few years, we added utility vehicles. We added trash trucks. Well, now we don't have to make a decision of what's the purpose of that vehicle. If there's a vehicle and it's on the side of the road and it's got warning lights flashing, no matter the color, if it's got cones out, reflectors like the semis carry and things like that, it's covered. It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward, and we believe this will help in not only the enforcement, but also in the public understanding of when it is they're expected to move over for the safety of everybody on the roadway. And we think that's a very, very important component of this. It's also very consistent with what we have with the other statutes out there for those other types of vehicles. Fines consistent, and the policy how it applies is pretty consistent. So we urge your support in this. We believe this will increase the safety on the highways. You know, many times when people have a vehicle on the side of the road where they're waiting for assistance or working on it, changing a tire or whatever the problem may be, oftentimes we have families in those cars. We have little children in those cars. And when those cars get hit, it's usually not a very good result. It's usually a very serious injury occurs. So we would urge you to move this bill forward favorably, and I'll stand for questions.
Committee questions? Seeing none, thank you. Next up, we have KDOT. Welcome to the committee.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Catherine Magana, and I serve as the legislative liaison for the Kansas Department of Transportation. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of Senate Bill 8 in proponent testimony. KDOT's mission is to improve the safety and quality of life for the traveling public by reducing the number of motor vehicle fatalities, injuries, and crashes, which is why the agency is proud to support SB 8, the Move Over for Disabled Vehicles bill. A lot of the crash statistics that the state have already been touched on, but I will reiterate that within the last 5 years, we have seen nearly 1,000 empty vehicles hit on the side of Kansas roadways. We've also seen 10 fatalities as a result of these disabled vehicles being hit, whether there are people inside or not. Our goal is paramount of streamlining the education efforts for drivers to know that when there is a disabled vehicle on the side of the road, whether or not it is law enforcement or just a typical vehicle, it's better to just move over and slow down. Our goal is to eliminate any type of confusion in these education efforts, as we have previously mentioned, so that it's easier for drivers to not have to make a breakneck decision about whether or not they need to move over, if it's a law enforcement vehicle or anything else. KDOT is proud to be a partner in safety on the Drive to Zero Coalition. With many of the other partners that have already spoken today, the Drive to Zero Coalition efforts in education are strongly to improve safety on Kansas roadways, and this is one small part of that mission. We are proud to be supportive of this bill, and if you have any questions, please let me know.
Committee questions. Senator Clem.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we had talked about it briefly earlier. How do you get the message out, or what's the plan to market? Yeah. And go ahead.
Sure. The Drive to Zero Coalition, which KDOT chairs, partners with local law enforcement agencies, lots of other Kansas Hospital Association, many other partners, AAA, that we all work together to message not only to the media, but also through KDOT campaigns, through law enforcement campaigns. A lot of this is just about educating and re-educating, so working with local municipalities, cities, and counties to make sure that this message is getting out to drivers on their roadways. And then, sorry? Oh, yeah, and we, of course, on social media as well, yeah, on both KDOT and, of course, all the other partners. So it's just about getting the word out as much as possible in any avenues we can.
They do put some good ads out on social media. They're worth watching all the way through. Committee, just as a side note, if you do not have Catherine Magana's contact information, she is our liaison to KDOT. Being on Transportation Committee, you will receive a lot of calls and questions. If she doesn't have the answer, she knows who to call to get it. So if you want to get after the meeting, you want to get her contact information. Is there any further questions for Catherine? Seeing none, thank you. Committee note that we have written testimony only from the Kansas League of Municipalities and Safe Kids Kansas. Is there any further people wishing to testify on this bill? Any neutrals? Any opponents? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on Senate Bill 8. Committee, the agenda will not say we're meeting next Thursday. We'll be bringing up a license plate bill. I didn't have it clarified with the person if they could make it, so I didn't put it on the agenda, but we will. I'm not planning on meeting on Friday, but we do have a meeting on call of the chair. We'll let you know from announcement from the floor if we do, but I am not planning on that already. Any further business to come before the committee? I have one item. We finally got the KDOT report on driver education grants up on committee documents on our webpage. So it's actually in the right spot now. Appreciate all the help and work from Florence. We don't know why it wouldn't go to documents, but they got it fixed last night. So thank you. With that, we are adjourned.